What causes obesity? Welcome back to the Holistic Health Bites podcast. Today we're going to talk about the differing models of what causes obesity. Despite decades of research and hundreds of studies on what causes obesity, there's still a lot of controversy. If it were really as simple as eating too much and not getting enough exercise, then the eat less, move more advice would have worked decades ago on a widespread scale. But with over 40% of the adult population in the US being obese, then there are two possibilities here. Either this advice is correct and no one's following it, or the advice is wrong, or at least not sufficient. A paper published recently in Nature Metabolism presents two competing hypotheses of obesity. The authors of this paper highlight the similarities and differences in the models and proposes a different approach for future research. The paper is authored by 16 researchers and clinicians who work in the field of weight loss research and who see the true cause of obesity differently. The competing models in this study are the energy balance model and the carbohydrate-insulin model. The energy balance model is essentially boiled down to the calories in versus calories out that we've all heard is what drives weight gain or loss. Some also do consider macronutrients and hormones, but ultimately excess energy intake is what's resulting in fat deposition, regardless of the macronutrient composition of the diet. In other words, people with obesity have accumulated excess fat mass because they've taken in excess energy, and the same amount of excess energy would have resulted in an equivalent increase in fat mass, regardless of whether those calories came from broccoli or potato chips. On the other hand, the carbohydrate-insulin model considers the primary cause of obesity is due to hormonal and metabolic effects that different macronutrients have on storage and burning of incoming fuel. This model blames refined carbohydrates the most due to the rise in insulin and an excessive rise in those with insulin resistance, which signals fat storage rather than fat burning. Both models acknowledge that it's hard for people to make long-term dietary changes when they're constantly surrounded by hyperpalatable, cheap, and common ultra-processed foods. They also both acknowledge the influence of sleep quality, physical activity, environmental factors such as endocrine-disrupting chemicals, and social factors such as education level, socioeconomic status, and the circle of people they hang out with. But the carbohydrate-insulin model suggests that people would see greater benefit if they were told to limit overall carbohydrate intake, especially the consumption of highly refined carbohydrate foods that cause frequent and sustained higher levels of insulin, rather than simply being told to just take in less food. The energy balance model claims that the brain loses the ability to control food intake because of the food environment. Whereas the carbohydrate-insulin model suggests that the brain is fully capable of controlling food intake, which they say is why we see reduced energy expenditure or burning with reduced energy intake. So the body is actually functioning properly. If you take in less, you'll burn less. We know that's true. The energy balance model says that the brain's ability to sense hunger and fullness has been altered by the modern food environment. There's a reason why the slogan is, you can't just eat one. Whereas the carbohydrate-insulin model says it's not that the brain doesn't properly perceive the hunger, it's that when highly refined carbs trigger the high insulin spike, the energy is pushed into storage, namely the storage of fat, rather than burning. This actually leaves low levels of fuel in the blood to be used for energy. This leaves the body feeling hungry despite being fed, or even overly fed. This is the state of internal starvation, which is driving the continued drive to eat, and therefore overeat, especially on refined carbohydrates. So you can see the differences between these models of obesity are significant. They propose different causes for the fat accumulation. This has major implications for the best, most effective, and long-lasting ways to reverse or prevent this, which in turn has great implications for public policy, the food industry, and clinical practice. In my view, as a functional nutritionist, I think both models can exist on some level together. although I tend far more to the side of the carbohydrate-insulin model. Let me explain a little bit further how I can say that I think both models that seem to be diametrically opposed can both somewhat be true. Firstly, I see the benefits for myself and my clients when we focus on eating following the carbohydrate-insulin model. Low insulin eating less often, and eliminating refined and simple sugars. Eating in this fashion not only helps to reduce body fat and overall unhealthy weight, but resets appetite, calms the food noise, and many people note other benefits like reduced joint pain, fewer headaches, improved physical functioning and strength, increased desire to be active, just to name a few. And we can literally see the metabolic benefits on lab testing and with many other health biometrics. So what about the energy balance model is correct? It is true that overconsumption of food, any food, can cause weight or fat gain. I have seen this in my clients with a long history of over-consuming foods for a variety of reasons, whether that be past trauma, lack of food availability as a child, eating disorders, lengthy history of ultra-processed food consumption, all the reasons why people currently overeat, and that's what they're used to. For these clients, it can be a real challenge to retrain their brain as to what a normal meal looks like. These quality, nutrient-dense foods take up a whole lot less space on the plate than refined carbohydrates do. So their brain still wants to fill their plate. And most of us are eating mindlessly or have been trained to clean our plates. This can lead to overeating outside of true hunger. I do also see that for those who don't fully move into consuming whole, unprocessed foods, even if they reduce or eliminate refined and simple carbs, they still struggle with food addictions, dysregulated hunger signaling, and a drive to consume more than they otherwise biologically would. I think this is due to other chemical additives in these processed foods. Even low-sugar, carb-free processed foods can push this drive. This is why I'm not a fan of keto treats or any food in the grocery store that's labeled based on a particular diet. These chemicals are powerful, regardless of their sugar or calorie content. This is why we've seen time and time again that the low-fat snacks, aka SnackWells, didn't work. The low-sugar, aka keto snacks, don't work. And why most commercial diet plans with processed packaged foods don't work long-term. They're all keeping the hunger and addictions alive. In the end, biochemistry will win this debate. Frankly, I don't really care what we call the model. What I want is for people to return to eating real, natural, whole foods, the way we've eaten for all of human history up until the industrial food revolution that changed us from farming to factories, and even factory farming. If your great-grandparents wouldn't have known what a food is or how it was created, stay away from it. Stick to natural meats, eggs, seafood, non-starchy vegetables primarily. For the low insulin benefits, avoid grains, sugars, most fruits, legumes, and starches, especially if you have type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, or any insulin resistance condition. Until the next, be well and vibrant.